A fence rises in Fresno, stealing Elijah Carter's land. Who's behind it? A cunning builder and a corrupt HOA. Will Elijah's legal savvy expose their lies? You won't believe the twist that flips the fight. Don't miss what happens next. Watch now. The afternoon sun baked the cracked sidewalks of Fresno, California, in July 2024, but Elijah Carter felt a chill as he stared at the new wooden fence cutting through his backyard. 10 meters of his land, gone. The posts, fresh and gleaming, mocked him, their placement deliberate, slicing off a chunk of the property he'd fought to keep for decades. At 51, Elijah, a black man with a sharp mind honed by years in the district's cadastral office, knew this wasn't a mistake. Someone had planned this theft. He adjusted his glasses and crouched near the fence, tracing the boundary with a calloused finger. The line was wrong, dead wrong. His property, a modest lot on the edge of Fresno's suburban sprawl, had been in his family since his grandfather bought it in the 1960s. Every inch was sacred, mapped out in deeds Elijah could recite by heart. He pulled out his phone, snapping photos of the posts, his jaw tight. The Homeowners Association, HOA, had sent a vague notice about community improvements weeks ago, but this was a land grab. Elijah's neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, poked her head over her own fence, her voice low. They came at dawn, Elijah. Buzz Canning's crew said it was HOA orders. Fred Buzz Canning, a 48-year-old construction boss with a reputation for bending rules, was no stranger to Elijah. Buzz's trucks, emblazoned with Canning Construction, had been parked at the HOA president's house too often for coincidence. Elijah nodded, his mind already racing through the cadastral records he'd spent years mastering. Back inside, Elijah spread out his property deed on the kitchen table. The paper worn but precise. The boundary line was clear. His lot extended 10 meters beyond the new fence. He cross-referenced it with the county's digital records, his fingers flying over his laptop. The HOA's permit, buried in a public database, claimed the fence was for aesthetic alignment. No mention of his land, no survey, no consent. Elijah's blood boiled. This was deliberate, and Buzz was the muscle behind it. The next morning, Elijah drove to the district office, his suit crisp despite the heat. His colleagues respected him, a man who'd climbed from clerk to senior cadastral officer through sheer grit and legal acumen. He pulled the HOA's file, scanning for discrepancies. There it was, a hastily filed amendment to the neighborhood plat, dated a month ago, shifting the boundary to favor the HOA's common area. The signature, Buzz Canning's, as consultant. Elijah's eyes narrowed. Buzz wasn't just building fences, he was redrawing maps. At a coffee shop that evening, Elijah met Sasha Kim, a 30-year-old environmental engineer who had moved to Fresno for a city project. Sasha had a knack for spotting what others missed, and she'd tipped Elijah off about Buzz's crew dumping soil on protected land. I saw their plans at the city office, Sasha said, sliding a folder across the table. They're expanding the HOA's rec center, but they need your land for parking. Buzz pushed it through. Her dark eyes flashed with defiance. They didn't count on you. Elijah flipped through Sasha's documents, surveys, emails, and a blurry photo of Buzz shaking hands with the HOA president. The pieces fit. The HOA, desperate for funds, was colluding with Buzz to seize his land, banking on Elijah not noticing. But they'd underestimated him. He leaned back, his voice steady. They want a fight? They'll get one. By nightfall, Elijah was back home, drafting a formal complaint to the county. His pen moved with precision, citing California property law, cadastral errors, and the HOA's overreach. He knew the stakes. If he lost, his family's legacy would shrink, and Buzz's crew would keep pushing. But Elijah Carter didn't back down. He'd spent his life learning the law, and now it was his weapon. The Fresno sun rose mercilessly, its heat pressing against Elijah Carter's modest home. But inside, the air was thick with resolve. Elijah hadn't slept. His kitchen table, once a place for family dinners, was now a war room, strewn with maps, deeds, and Sasha Kim's damning documents. The HOA's illegal fence, stealing 10 meters of his land, wasn't just a personal affront, it was a wound to his family's legacy. At 51, Elijah felt the weight of his grandfather's pride in this plot. Bought against the odds in a segregated 1960s Fresno, he wouldn't let Buzz Canning and his HOA cronies erase that. Elijah's phone buzzed with a text from Sasha. "Meet me at the city archives. Noon. Found something big." Her urgency fueled him. He pulled on a fresh shirt, his movements deliberate, and drove to the district office. His colleagues noticed the fire in his eyes, a quiet man turned warrior. "You okay, Elijah?" asked Maria, a junior clerk. He gave a tight nod. "Just fixing a wrong." But the stakes were higher now. Neighbors had started whispering about the fence, some siding with the HOA, lured by promises of a shiny new rec center. Elijah felt the community fracturing, and it stung. At the city archives, Sasha waited in a dimly lit room, her laptop open to a scanned document. "This," she said, pointing to a grainy plat amendment, "was filed 3 months ago, before the fence went up. It's forged." Elijah leaned in, his pulse quickening. The amendment, which shifted his property line to favor the HOA, bore a notary's seal, but the notary's name didn't exist in California's records. Sasha's research had uncovered a ghost. "Buzz didn't just bend the rules," she said. "He broke them, and someone in the county let it slide." The revelation hit Elijah like a punch. This wasn't just about Buzz's greed or the HOA's desperation for parking space. Someone higher up was complicit, shielding the scam. Elijah's mind raced through county officials he'd crossed paths with over the years. Most were honest, but a few owed favors to men like Buzz, whose construction contracts lined pockets. "We need to trace the money," Elijah said, his voice low. Sasha nodded, already pulling up campaign donations linked to the HOA president. A pattern emerged, thousands funneled through shell companies, all tied to Canning Construction. Back home, the impact of the fight began to ripple. Elijah's daughter, Lena, 24, called from Oakland, her voice sharp with worry. "Dad, people are talking online. They're saying you're stirring trouble, hurting the neighborhood." Elijah gripped the phone, his chest tight. The HOA had launched a smear campaign, painting him as a stubborn loner blocking progress. Posts on Fresno's community forums, likely seeded by Buzz's allies, twisted the truth. "Elijah Carter's holding up our rec center. Selfish." The words cut deep, but Elijah's resolve hardened. He wouldn't let lies bury his truth. That evening, Elijah stood in his backyard, staring at the offending fence. Its posts loomed like sentinels of betrayal. He heard a rustle and turned to see Mrs. Delgado, his neighbor, clutching a flyer. "HOA's holding a meeting tomorrow," she said, her eyes nervous. "They're voting to enforce the new boundary. Buzz will be there, rallying them." Elijah took the flyer, his fingers tracing the bold words, "Support our community's future." The audacity of it burned. Buzz wasn't just stealing land, he was weaponizing the neighborhood against him. The next day, Elijah and Sasha arrived at the HOA meeting, held in a stuffy community center. The room buzzed with tension, neighbors glancing at Elijah with mixed looks, curiosity, pity, hostility. Buzz Canning stood at the front, his construction jacket swapped for a pressed polo, playing the charming everyman. "This fence is about unity," he said, his voice smooth. "A better Fresno for all." Elijah's fists clenched. He stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. "Unity doesn't mean stealing my land," he said, holding up his deed. "This plat's forged. You know it. Buzz." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Buzz's smile faltered, but he recovered fast. "Elijah's confused. The county approved this." But Elijah was ready. He projected Sasha's forged plat onto a screen, the notary's fake name circled in red. "No notary, no legal boundary," he said. "You're breaking California law." The room erupted in murmurs, neighbors turning to Buzz, whose face reddened. The HOA president, A wiry man named Gregson stammered, "We'll review this." But Elijah saw the panic in their eyes. He'd struck a nerve. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, Sasha whispered to Elijah, "They'll come for you now." Hard. She was right. That night, Elijah found a brick through his window, a note tied to it. "Back off, Carter." His heart pounded, but fear gave way to fury. This wasn't just about land anymore, it was personal. Buzz and his allies were desperate, and desperate men played dirty. Elijah called Sasha, his voice steady despite the glass shards at his feet. "We need to go bigger. County hearing. Public record. They can't hide from that." The twist came the next morning. Sasha dug deeper into the shell companies and found a name. Councilman Richard Holt, a county official with ties to Buzz's donations. Holt had fast-tracked the forged plat, bypassing checks. The discovery was dynamite. If Elijah could prove it, the HOA scheme would collapse, and Buzz would face more than fines. But Holt was powerful, with connections that could bury Elijah's complaint. The fight had escalated from a backyard feud to a battle against Fresno's corrupt underbelly. Elijah stood at his kitchen table, the forged plat and Holt's name staring back at him. His daughter's words echoed, "You're stirring trouble," but so did his grandfather's. "This land is ours." Elijah, hold it tight. He'd lost sleep, friends, and now his window, but he wouldn't lose this fight. With Sasha by his side, he began drafting a petition for a county hearing, citing fraud and abuse of power. The law was still his weapon, and he'd wield it like a blade. Elijah Carter's kitchen, once a haven, now felt like a bunker. The broken window, boarded up after the brick-throwing threat, let in slivers of Fresno's August before dawn. At 51, Elijah's face bore new lines, etched by sleepless nights and the weight of his fight against the HOA's land grab. The forged plat, Councilman Richard Holt's shadowy ties to Buzz Canning, and the neighborhood's growing hostility had turned his backyard feud into a crucible. But Elijah wasn't alone. Sasha Kim, the sharp-eyed environmental engineer, sat across from him, her laptop glowing with new evidence. "We've got Holt's emails," she said, her voice taut. "He's dirty, Elijah, and scared." The emails, obtained through Sasha's relentless digging into public records, showed Holt pressuring county clerks to approve the HOA's forged plat. One message, sent to Buzz, read, "Carter's sniffing around. Speed this up." Elijah's stomach churned. Holt wasn't just complicit. He was orchestrating the theft, using his influence to bury Elijah's complaints. The revelation shifted the power dynamic. Buzz was the face of the scheme, but Holt was its brain, a man with enough clout to make problems disappear. Elijah knew exposing Holt could topple the whole operation or get him crushed. The county hearing was set for next week, a public stage where Elijah's petition would face scrutiny. He and Sasha spent days preparing, compiling a dossier, the forged plat, Holt's emails, and financial records linking Canning Construction to HOA funds. Elijah's legal expertise shone as he crafted arguments citing California's property laws and fraud statutes. But the personal toll mounted. His daughter, Lena, texted from Oakland to him, "Dad, I'm scared for you. People are saying you're suing the county now." The HOA's smear campaign had escalated, framing Elijah as a troublemaker attacking Fresno itself. Neighbors he'd known for years avoided his gaze, and Mrs. Delgado whispered that Buzz's crew was spreading rumors of retaliation if Elijah didn't back down. The resistance grew uglier. 2 nights before the hearing, Elijah's car tires were slashed, the word "quit" scrawled in paint across his driveway. He stood into the dark, his breath shallow, feeling the walls closing in. Sasha arrived, her face grim. "They're trying to break you," she said, helping him scrub the paint. "But we're close. Holt's slipping." She showed him a new find, a whistleblower from the county clerk's office, a young woman named Carla, who'd overheard Holt threatening staff to lose Elijah's filings. Carla was willing to testify, anonymously. For now, the tide was turning, but the cost was steep. Elijah's resolve hardened. fueled by a memory of his grandfather, who'd faced down redlining and threats to secure this land. He visited the Fresno Historical Society, digging into old maps to bolster his case. There, he found a 1965 survey buried in dusty archives, confirming his property's boundaries beyond doubt. The document was a bombshell, predating the HOA's existence and nullifying their claims. Elijah clutched it like a talisman, his voice steady as he told Sasha, "This ends with the truth." The day of the hearing arrived, the county courthouse buzzing with the reporters and curious residents. Elijah walked in, his suit pressed, carrying a briefcase heavy with evidence. Sasha flanked him, her blazer sharp, her eyes scanning the crowd. Buzz Canning sat with the HOA president, Gregson, their faces tight. Holt was absent, a strategic move, but his shadow loomed. The hearing room, packed with neighbors, felt like a powder keg. Elijah took the stand, his voice clear, recounting the forged plat, the illegal fence, and Holt's emails. He held up the 1965 survey, its faded ink a silent rebuke to Buzz's lies. "This land is mine," he said, "and you can't steal it." The room erupted in murmurs. Sasha followed, presenting the financial records, her tone fierce. "Canning Construction profited while the HOA misled this community," she said, pointing to Buzz. A neighbor shouted, "Is that true?" Buzz's charm cracked, his eyes darting to Gregson, who looked ready to bolt. Then came Carla, her voice trembling but firm, testifying via video about Holt's threats. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for fairness, leaned forward, her pen pausing. Elijah felt a spark of hope. But the HOA fought back. Their lawyer, a slick man from out of town, claimed Elijah's evidence was circumstantial and accused him of fabricating the 1965 survey. Buzz took the stand, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm just a builder serving Fresno," he said, casting Elijah as an obsessive loner. The attack stung, but Elijah's preparation held. He countered with county records, proving the survey's authenticity, and cited case law on fraudulent plats. The judge's eyes narrowed, her questions to Buzz growing sharper. The hearing's climax came when a reporter, tipped off by Sasha, asked Gregson point-blank about Holt's involvement. Gregson stammered, sweat beading on his brow, and muttered, "No comment." The room sensed blood in the water. Elijah saw neighbors whispering, their faith in the HOA crumbling. The power had shifted, not fully, but enough. The judge adjourned for deliberation, warning both sides of serious consequences for fraud. As Elijah left the courthouse, a few neighbors nodded to him, their hostility thawing. Mrs. Delgado hugged him, tears in her eyes. "You did right, Elijah." That night, Elijah sat in his backyard, the fence still standing but its menace fading. Sasha brought coffee, her smile tired but triumphant. "Holt's office called the judge," she said. "He's offering to review the plat if we drop his name." Elijah shook his head. "No deals. He falls with Buzz." The hidden truth, Holt's corruption, had been dragged into the light, and the community was waking up. But the fight wasn't over. Buzz and Holt were cornered, and cornered men were dangerous. Elijah knew the final battle loomed, and he'd need every ounce of his strength to win. The Fresno courthouse stood resolute under a cloud-streaked snow in late August 2024, its stone facade a silent witness to Elijah Carter's final stand. At 51, Elijah felt the weight of every step as he entered, his briefcase heavier than ever, filled with the truth that had cost him sleepless nights, a shattered window, and the trust of neighbors. The HOA's illegal fence, stealing 10 meters of his family's land, had sparked a war, exposing a web of corruption spun by Fred Buzz Canning and Councilman Richard Holt. Today, the judge's ruling would end it or break him. Inside, the hearing room crackled with anticipation. Reporters lined the back, their cameras trained on Elijah, Sasha Kim, and the HOA's rattled leadership. Buzz sat stiffly, his usual swagger gone, while Gregson, the HOA president, fidgeted beside a high-priced lawyer. Holt's absence was conspicuous. His name now a lightning rod, after Sasha's leaked emails tied him to the forged plat. Elijah's heart pounded, but his face was stone. He'd fought too hard, through threats, slashed tires, and a smear campaign to falter now. The judge, Margaret Ruiz, took her seat, her gaze piercing. This case, she began, alleges fraud, abuse of power, and a violation of property rights. The evidence is compelling. She recounted Elijah's dossier, the 1965 survey proving his land's boundaries, the forged plat with a fake notary, Holt's incriminating emails, and whistleblower Carla's testimony about county interference. Elijah's chest tightened as Ruiz turned to Buzz. "Mr. Canning, your defense has been unconvincing." Buzz's lawyer leapt up, arguing the HOA acted in good faith and that Elijah's claims were inflated. But Ruiz cut him off, citing California Penal Code 115, filing false documents, a felony. The Platt Amendment was not only fraudulent, she said, but deliberately concealed. She turned to Gregson, who shrank under her stare. "Your organization's complicity is undeniable." The room held its breath as Ruiz announced her ruling. The fence was illegal, Elijah's land was restored, and the HOA faced a $250,000 fine for fraud and punitive damages. A cheer erupted from the gallery, where Mrs. Delgado and a few neighbors clapped, their doubts replaced by admiration. Elijah exhaled, his shoulders easing for the first time in months. But Ruiz wasn't done. "This court refers Councilman Holt and Mr. Canning to the district attorney for investigation," she declared. "No one is above the law." Buzz's face drained of color, his eyes darting to the exit as if he could outrun justice. Gregson slumped, defeated. Outside, reporters swarmed Elijah and Sasha. "Mr. Carter, how does it feel to win?" one asked. Elijah paused, the weight of his grandfather's legacy grounding him. "This wasn't just my fight," he said, his voice steady. "It was for everyone who's had their rights trampled." Sasha, her blazer slightly rumpled, but her smile fierce, added, "Fresno's waking up. Corruption can't hide forever." The crowd parted as Lena, Elijah's daughter, pushed through, throwing her arms around him. "I'm so proud, Dad," she whispered, tears streaking her face. The smear campaign's sting faded in that embrace. The fallout was swift. Buzz's construction empire crumbled as contracts dried up, his name toxic after the DA charged him with fraud and conspiracy. Holt resigned that evening, his political career in ashes, facing probes into his campaign funds. The HOA, humiliated, replaced Gregson with a reformist board, and the illegal fence came down within days. Each post removal a victory for Elijah. His backyard, scarred but whole, felt sacred again. Elijah's triumph rippled beyond his lot. Neighbors, once swayed by Buzz's lies, stopped by to apologize, some bringing casseroles, others offering to repaint his driveway. Mrs. Delgado organized a block party, the first in years, where Elijah was toasted as a hero. Sasha, now a local celebrity for her investigative work, used the spotlight to push for stricter oversight of HOAs statewide. Her environmental project gained funding, and she and Elijah remained allies, bonded by their shared fight. One evening, Elijah sat on his porch, the Fresno sunset painting the sky in hues of fire. Lena, visiting from Oakland, joined him, holding a photo of his grandfather. "He'd be proud," she said. Elijah nodded, his eyes tracing the land he'd saved. The scars of the battle, his slashed tires, the boarded window, the hateful notes were fading, replaced by a quiet strength. He'd faced down a giant and won, not just for himself, but for the community he'd feared had turned against him. The final piece fell into place weeks later, when the county named a new cadastral scholarship after Elijah, honoring his expertise and courage. At the ceremony, he spoke briefly, his words simple but resonant. "This land, this home, it's more than dirt. It's our story. Protect it." The applause was deafening, but Elijah's gaze lingered on Sasha, Lena, and Mrs. Delgado. his true anchors. As winter approached, Elijah walked his property line, the grass already regrowing where the fence had stood. The air was crisp, the silence profound. Buzz was gone, Holt was disgraced, and the HOA was humbled. Elijah Carter, the unyielding cadastral officer, had rewritten the map of justice in Fresno. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. Hold it tight. He had, and he always would. Elijah Carter faced deceit but fought for truth, exposing a land grab that shook Fresno. Thank you for joining his journey. Like, subscribe, and comment below. What would you do in his shoes? Stay tuned for more gripping stories.